We're all set. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second virtual meeting regarding the reopening of schools for Western Suffolk BOCES. I'm Mike Flynn. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Western Suffolk BOCES, and I welcome you to the forum. We had our first meeting earlier today, and actually I updated some of the guidance from the Suffolk County Department of Health. The Department of Health has updated its guidance in terms of the protocols to follow with respect to individuals who've been identified as having COVID-19. So I've incorporated that new information in the evening presentation I'm going to make, and also clarified some of the other information from this morning's presentation. So as an introduction to the program presentation this evening, the single most important question I'm asked and the most frequent question I'm asked by parents is, are schools safe for my child to come back? And the answer is yes. We've spent the past 2 or 3 months at all levels within the agency of ensuring that we have full compliance with all of the requirements that have been issued by the New York State Department of Health, the New York State Department of Education, as well as the governor's office. And we're as safe as a school could be. I would have my own children go to the school. I'm that comfortable, I'm that confident, but I understand the concerns that parents have, particularly for parents of special education children who might have an underlying medical condition. And I'll tell you that it's a concern that we respect, we value. And as we get into the presentation tonight, you're going to learn that we're going to provide different options for different parents, particularly for parents who are not yet comfortable with returning their child to school. I can tell you that we've taken all the measures that we can to protect your child, protect our staff. The state has developed a guidance that was issued in mid-July, where they introduced several new requirements that schools must follow with respect to temperature checks of students and staff, and having parents respond to health screening questionnaires, having staff and visitors respond to those same questionnaires. All these precautions have been implemented to mitigate the transmission of the virus, but it does require the cooperation of everyone. 99% isn't sufficient. Every staff member, every parent of a student has to comply. When we talk about things with temperature checks, morning is a very hectic time. Trying to get your child up and dressed and give them breakfast. And now you have to introduce the notion of taking your child's temperature. But we have to do that. We have to protect one another. We have to protect our students. And if there's a child who has a fever, they shouldn't be coming to school anyway, having nothing to do with COVID-19. If a staff member has a fever, that staff member shouldn't be coming to school, having, again, nothing to do with COVID-19. We don't want to share illness throughout the building. But we want to take it to a new level today because of COVID-19. We want to ensure a maximum protection for everyone. That's the goal here. And that's what we've been focusing on for the whole summer, to maximize our mitigation efforts to prevent any transmission of the spread of COVID-19. So when we ask the parents to take that temperature, we're going to ask you, please do that. We've worked hard to develop a system where we are going to request the parents to report that information to us every morning. We're going to provide our parents and staff with this app, which goes on to the telephone. Parents can report it over the internet. And we're going to put a backup system into place for any parent that forgets to do it, doesn't have the thermometer. Things happen, in the morning. But ideally, if a child has a fever, they should not be presented at school. If a staff member has a fever, they should not come to school. But we're going to do temperature checks also as a double check, just to ensure that for students that didn't have their temperature checked, that we identify any individual who might have a temperature of 100 degrees, 0.0 Fahrenheit or higher, that they're not permitted to enter the school. So we're in this together. We all share the same goals here, which is to protect our children, protect our staff, protect one another in these very challenging times. And that's singularly the most important message I can send. Help us protect your children, because that's the concern that you have. That's the decision that you're weighing. And I've taken many, many calls from parents over the summer. I know well about children being out of school for the past 5 months, about regression that's occurred, and the need for children to come back to school. And we want your children back at school. We want to be back at school. And we've put into place measures that we think will provide that protection for everyone. And we're hoping that parents will make a decision to return their child to school. And if not, we provided an alternate option for those parents. So let's begin with the PowerPoint presentation. Last week, we had loaded our reopening plan onto our BOCES website. We put out a call to have staff and parents go to that plan and to review it. And we know you're doing it, because we asked to have parents submit questions to us that they had after reviewing our reopening plan. And we received many, many questions. And what we have attempted to do in this presentation tonight is incorporate in our slide PowerPoint responses to those questions that parents have asked. And then at the end of the presentation, we actually have a number of questions that we just lifted right off our website, or right off the email that was shared with us for our parents. So please look at the restart plan, the reopening plan. This is not the first and last meeting. After this meeting that we've invited parents to attend, we're going to schedule a divisional and meetings with the directors and the building principals so that parents are able to ask questions that are specific to their child's school. We want to be in a position to answer all those questions. Communication is critical. We want our parents to be informed. And we're also looking to host a virtual meeting before the schools open up for our parents and students to welcome them back several days before school opens up. So Tim, the first slide, please. So reopening plan highlights. We're looking to ensure that our students and staff and parents feel comfortable and safe about the reopening of school. And we've done that by prioritizing above everything else, health and safety protocols, health and safety measures, and everything that we're required to do, we're doing, and then some. Our plan incorporates all the requirements and recommendations from the state Department of Health, from the state education department, from the CDC. And when we filed our plan with the state, we had to provide assurances that we are complying with all the elements that the state health department, state education department included in the guidance documents that they released in mid-July, where they laid out in great detail all the requirements that must be met by schools in order to reopen in September. The plan focuses on student and staff safety where it should, incorporates all the measures, incorporates the issues of temperature checks, which we discussed, and the health screenings and facial coverings, and many other issues related to protecting students' health and safety. We've also incorporated into our plan, which I'll address a little bit later in the presentation, options for parents to send their child back full-time, 5-day-a-week programming in all our programs in special education, in career and technical ed. And we're also offering parents the option to select a program of continuing remote instruction. That's what parents have been experiencing since mid-March when the governor closed schools. And if parents are still not comfortable returning their child to school in September, they'll have the option to continue with the remote instruction. If a parent selects that option, they will not be able to change their child's program back into in-person into the first quarter. The reasons for that is that as students shift from a remote instructional program to an in-person instructional program, we're going to have to make staffing adjustments. We're going to have to reassign staff, create new classes, and all that takes time. This meeting and the ones to come next week will help inform parents, help you make that decision. We're hoping that you're going to have the comfort level and confident that your child's able to return to school and have a safe experience. Tim? Priority number one, health and safety. Face coverings are required for all students, for all staff and all visitors. There is a caveat when it comes to students. Students who have a medical condition or have a disability are exempt from wearing the facial covering. However, all other students are required to wear a mask. All staff are required to wear the mask at all times during the day, and all visitors are required to wear a mask. If the parent wishes to have their child wear a personal facial covering, that's perfectly fine. If your child doesn't have a personal mask, the school will provide the student with a mask. If the student forgets their mask, or if a staff member forgets their mask, we will have more than ample supply on site, but where no one will enter the building without a mask. There is a need to provide what are being referred to as mask breaks. It's not really something that people can do, which is to wear a mask all day long without taking a break from it. It's highly recommended that students and staff be permitted to do so, and we're going to do that. And students will be afforded regular opportunities, regular intervals throughout the school day to remove their mask. When that's done, it has to be done with social distancing of 6 feet or greater. And likewise with staff. Staff will be provided with the opportunity to take face mask breaks, and that will be done when in fact there's a distance of 6 feet or greater. All of those measures that were emphasized last March when the pandemic began to increase and spread, all those safety measures are still in play. So hand care, washing your hand frequently, thoroughly, use of hand sanitizers, keeping your hands away from your face. All these protocols, including now social distancing, are very important. Every one of them are important to the collective process of keeping all of us safe. And that's going to be something that we're going to ask for full compliance on the part of students and their parents and our staff going forward. That's what's going to make our precautions work for everyone and keep everyone safe. The daily temperature and the symptom screenings is something that I've mentioned. We put a lot of effort into that, put a lot of effort into securing devices that record individuals' temperatures when they come into the room, into the building. What we're trying to do is to prevent anyone from coming into our school that has a temperature, and we will do that. If you have a temperature, you will not be permitted into school. If you're a child, you'll be taken to an area where you await the arrival of your parent. And again, that situation will always be supervised by a staff member with the child. Social distancing, it's required in all of our instructional areas. Our school looks very different in respects that we've had to move furniture out of classrooms to ensure that we have the 6 feet of social distancing. A question that is frequently asked of myself is, how do you have instruction in a classroom, particularly with children with disabilities, when there's a requirement of 6 feet for social distancing? And the answer is that the state has clarified that situation. And the state has said that as long as the staff member is wearing a facial covering, a staff member is not required to maintain 6 feet of social distancing. They can be in immediate proximity of the child, provided that there's an issue of student safety, or provided that that close proximity is required due to a core educational activity that has to be undertaken in the educational setting. So, for example, we have some students that have ambulation concerns, balancing concerns. Very frequent that staff will meet these children at the bus, and they'll walk them side by side into the school. We have other students that require assistance with their meals. So there are many, many situations in the classroom where the staff will have immediate proximity to the student. That is permitted, and it can only occur with the protective gear that the staff members would wear, and that would start with the facial covering. Another important issue for all of us to be concerned about is a process called tracing, contact tracing. So should there ever be a situation where a staff member or a student is reported to the school as having a confirmed case of COVID-19, the health department is required to conduct tracing. And what tracing means is that they're going to ask of the school to provide attendance information for every staff member and every student who is in the same instructional area or areas as the staff member or student who was diagnosed with a confirmed case of COVID-19. And the reason the health department wants that information is they want to reach out and notify the parents of every student. They want to notify the staff members in that situation. And what they're going to do is order them to undergo a home quarantine for 14 days. So if you've had close proximate contact with an individual who's been confirmed to have COVID-19, and close contact is defined as being having contact within 6 feet for a period of 10 minutes or longer. The Department of Health will evaluate that information, and the protocol that's in play currently is those individuals will have to remain under home quarantine for 14 days. And in a similar fashion, if for the individual, for the student or staff member who has a confirmed case of COVID-19, they, again, under the direction of the local health department, will have to remain at home for a period of 10 days under quarantine. And it's a little bit counterintuitive. You might say that, gee, someone who has a confirmed case of COVID-19 only stays home for 10 days, and whereas someone who had exposure to someone who had a confirmed case is required to stay home for 14 days. And the difference being is that there's a recognition in the medical community that prior to an individual being symptomatic with COVID symptoms, they are typically asymptomatic. They don't typically display those symptoms: fever, cough, trouble breathing, loss of taste and smell, so on and so forth. So during the 1 to 4 days prior, the individual, in fact, is going through a process of having the disease, but only becomes symptomatic where they typically know about having the disease or potentially having the disease to get tested until the 5th day. So that's why for people who are confirmed to have a case of COVID-19, the health department recognizes that even though they might have been tested on the 5th or 6th day, those individuals had the virus for 4 days prior to having the confirmation. So that's the reason why it's a 10-day quarantine for confirmed cases and 14-day quarantine for individuals who had close contact with an individual who had a confirmed case of COVID-19. We have enhanced disinfecting procedures. We put that into place back in March when the pandemic began to spread throughout the local region and the state. And those cleaning requirements require us to have regular cleanings, talking about the public shared space in a building, which could be hallways and doorknobs and entrance doors and bathrooms, where they're getting regularly cleaned during the day. And in the classroom, that's an ongoing process all day long of wiping down high-touch surfaces, just like I do in my office. If I'm working on my computer keyboard and someone has to come in and make some adjustments to my computer, I wipe it down before they touch it, and after they're finished, it gets wiped down, and that's what we have to do in a classroom. So anytime there is any sharing of any kind of instructional equipment, the staff will need to wipe it down thoroughly in between use to ensure that we're mitigating the spread. And that's what we'll continue to do in the classrooms throughout the day. In cases where there's been a confirmed case of a student or a staff member who in fact has COVID-19, we in fact will perform what's called a deep cleaning of all those areas that person had been present. And a deep cleaning is exactly what it sounds like. you're not just cleaning surfaces, you're going on walls, under desks, and you're doing a thorough clean of the entire area. In terms of whether or not there would ever be a school closing, which occurred occasionally back in March prior to the governor closing schools, the health department will be directly involved in making that decision. And my sense is that would only occur if there'd be multiple outbreaks within a class or within a school with respect to having to make a decision to close school. But whatever that decision is, the health department will be involved, will be supporting the school to make that right decision, and we will follow the direction of the local health department if that ever happens, and we're hoping it never will happen, quite frankly. We have a space in every building. It's a separate area where if a student should begin to display COVID-19 symptoms during the school day, they'll be brought to a separate area in the building. The nurse will evaluate that child. Just because a child is coughing or sneezing doesn't mean they have COVID-19. Many children, many individuals have medical issues that have nothing to do with COVID-19. You could be coming down with a cold. If you have a cough, if you have asthma, if you have underlying medical conditions, and that type of symptom is very common to the child, that's what the nurse is going to evaluate. We're not going to jump to a conclusion that if a child's coughing, they have COVID-19, or if they're sneezing, they have COVID-19. It's an informed decision that our medical staff has to make. And they will make it. They'll make those assessments. It might include calling the parent. It might include calling the child's doctor or calling the school doctor. But an assessment will be made, and the judgment of the nurse that the child may be suspected of displaying COVID-19 symptoms. The parent will be contacted, requested to pick their child up to school, from school, and then to follow up with the family's medical provider. We're going to be limiting gatherings, obviously, in schools and meetings for most of us today. Certainly for myself, probably 95% of my meetings are held just the way I'm speaking with you this evening. They're held electronically over a computer to mitigate the spread, and we'll be doing the same thing in school. There could be meetings of staff within the school itself that are held electronically to avoid commingling. Certainly within the school, the recommendation that's been offered, and we will follow it to the degree it's practical, is to mitigate the spread, is avoid trying to commingle groups of students with other students. And so to that degree, we're going to work with those type of situations. We don't anticipate having assemblies in the school, and we want to limit those instances, again, to the degree that's practical, where students commingle with multiple cohorts outside the immediate class that they're assigned to. Likewise, visitors will be limited into the building. Instead of having a parent conference, we'll have a conference via the computer. And the more that we limit the introduction of individuals into a school, the safer it is. And that's exactly what we expect to do. Tim? Next item is facial coverings. Lots been said to that. Our agency put a lot of effort into the purchasing of facial coverings for students where the parents request that. We have sufficient coverings for everyone, for staff. We went out and purchased 4-ply cloth facial coverings. 4-ply is very effective. And we're confident that they'll do the job that they're meant to do. And likewise, we have cloth facial masks for students. We have all different sizes that we purchase. We have them in stock. We went out and purchased them last June, so we wouldn't run into any type of situation where we couldn't access these types of supplies. If you remember, last March and April, you couldn't buy a mask because there was hoarding of them. There was short supply. So I can share with our parents. We've been acquiring all these personal protection equipment items for many months, facial coverings, face shields, gowns, gloves, hand sanitizers, disinfectants. All these items we've acquired so that we'll have more than ample supply in the schools to keep everyone safe. I mentioned earlier, we're going to schedule safe mask breaks during the day. Everyone needs it. No one's expected to wear a mask for a prolonged period of time. So we'll do it with the recommendations of ensuring that we have appropriate social distancing when that occurs. If there are staff or who want to wear a face shield, you must also wear a face mask. Face shields alone do not provide adequate protection. So if there are any staff wearing face shields, they'll also be wearing face masks at the same time. Tim? Cleaning, disinfecting. We have been and will continue to adhere to all of the cleaning and disinfecting requirements. We've in our classrooms, in order to ensure that we have sufficient space, as I mentioned, we've removed furniture, and we're giving a lot of attention into the type of equipment and supplies that are maintained in a classroom. We want them to all be cleanable at night and cleanable during the day by the school staff. That's the objective. Wipe everything down continuously throughout the day. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We'll be maintaining cleaning logs so that at the end of the day, we developed, and this goes back to last March. It's not something that we're doing new. We did it back in March when the virus presented itself. We have checklists for every custodian when they go into a classroom at night. Every area that they need to touch is on a checklist so they don't overlook any kind of area. Every area that's a touch surface, light switches, doorknobs, a teacher's desk, student desk, and any type of area that individual could have contact with will be thoroughly cleaned in the evening. Our kitchens, or kitchens in general in schools, are very clean places. They're constantly being cleaned outside the issue of COVID-19, but we've stepped up our cleaning program protocol. Again, this goes back to last March when we changed our cleaning protocol in our kitchens. We'll continue to do that to ensure that we're meeting the requirements and then some, that these are thoroughly disinfected areas and that we're doing this throughout the school day. One of the questions that came up is schools are required to use disinfectants and cleaning agencies that have been approved by the EPA for use in a school. And again, that's not new to COVID-19. That's always been the case. But when we introduce new items, they have to be on a list that's approved by the Environmental Protection Agency. Ventilation is another area that parents questioned us about. Every school has a ventilation system. It's not an air conditioning or a heating system. The purpose is to bring in fresh air into a school, into instructional space. And the amount of fresh air can be regulated We are, as schools are also, introducing the maximum amount of fresh air into that ventilation system. It not only pushes fresh air from the outside into the instructional spaces, it pulls it out. It circulates the air throughout the building. And as that air is returned to the air handlers, that air is filtered. And very similar to a filter that might be on a home heating system or a home air conditioning system. And there are, of course, different levels or grades of filters. So some filters have a higher degree of filtering particles in the air out of the air because the material or the fabric, the weave, provides for the filter to capture more particles. So we months ago changed out all the filters in all our schools, and we increased it to a higher level of filtration. You have to match the filter to the machine that's pulling the air through the system. What I mean by that is you can't over restrict the airflow. So you can't provide an air filter that's providing filtering of air that's above what the machinery will allow to operate safely and efficiently. So if you put in a filter that was rated at a higher level than the filtering system requires, eventually you would burn out the motor because the motor would be working too hard to pull the air through. So where we have increased the filtration in all our buildings to the maximum level that we can provide with the rating of the motors that operate that air system. And, to the extent we can increase fresh air in a building, it's good. Open up doors, open up windows, and we'll be doing that to the extent practical. Tim? So the next is what happens if a positive case is suspected. So again, this is not a situation of a confirmed case where we've gotten a call from a parent or a staff member or the Department of Health that someone in the school has a confirmed case of COVID-19. This particular slide deals with a student or a staff member who is suspected to possibly have the case because they're displaying symptoms. So the first thing to say is having nothing to do with COVID-19 is if a student is sick, if a staff member is sick, they should not come to school, they should not come to work. If having nothing to do with COVID-19, you could just have a cold, or if you have a fever, you should stay home. This child should stay home, the staff member should stay home. Secondly, if a staff member or a student is displaying symptoms of COVID-19 in school, there's a list I put up onto the PowerPoint: coughing, sore throat, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, chills, fever, fatigue, body aches, headaches, loss of taste or smell, congestion, diarrhea, etc. If you have those symptoms, again, the student or the staff member should not be coming to work. But if a staff member or a student were to develop these symptoms during the day, they would be removed from the instructional setting. They would be brought to a separate setting. They'd be evaluated by the school nurse to determine if, in fact, the symptoms are related to an underlying medical condition that the child has or the staff member has. And if necessary, reach out to the child's doctor to consult with them. But if it's the judgment of the nurse that the student is displaying symptoms that need further evaluation, she's going to call the parent, and the parent will be requested to come up to school to pick up their child and to follow up with their family caregiver. Again, in the case of a staff member, they'll be asked to leave school and to follow up immediately with their healthcare provider. If the school, once the student has been evaluated, they can return to school. It's not within the school's prerogative, nor within the prerogative of the health department to direct that any staff member or any student become tested for COVID-19. But certainly, that's why we urge staff, we urge parents, speak with your child's doctor, speak with your own doctor. They'll make a decision with you about further evaluation, and they'll make a decision about getting tested and follow their guidance. These are the medical people that we need their support, their guidance during these times, and we need to follow that guidance. And in all cases, if an individual has not been tested positive for COVID-19, they should not come back to school until all systems have dissipated, at least for 1 day, possibly 2 days. In cases where there was someone who was sick, again, we're going to do a cleaning. It has really nothing to do with COVID-19. It could, but if someone wasn't feeling well or they were coughing, we want to address that in any event and keep the environment in the school as safe as we can and continually sanitize it. And in fact, we will do that. Tim, next slide, please. The next slide deals with what happens if there is a positive case reported. And this information I just updated today in looking at an update that we received from the local health department. So the first thing is we not only we're required to follow the guidance that's put out by the state and the local health department when we have knowledge that a student or a staff member has a confirmed case of COVID-19. The first thing that we're required to do is to, and when this occurs, it typically occurs that the person is at home. I don't believe there will ever be a situation where a staff member or a parent calls us while the student or staff member is at school, because typically when you get tested, you displayed symptoms and you've been told to remain at home until the results of the test. So typically we'll get a call. When we get a call, if it's from the staff member or a parent of a student, we're required to immediately contact the health department, and in fact, we will. And the health department will follow the state's protocol. And I believe I mentioned that earlier, that in cases of a confirmed case of COVID-19, the student or staff member would be required to stay home and home quarantine for 10 days and would not be permitted to return to work or the student to return to school until they have been cleared by the local health department. And the process the health department follows is they actually issue a letter to the staff member or to the parent of the student, clearing the staff member to return to work or clearing the student to in fact return to school. And during that process of the home quarantine, the local health department will continue to follow up with the parents, if it's a student, or with the individual to make sure that their symptoms are being sufficiently treated at home, or if they need further treatment through a medical provider. The Our maintenance department, again, will perform a deep cleaning in all the areas that that staff member or that student visited while in school. And there'll also be contact tracing that will occur by the local health department, and that will occur for all the students and all the staff members within that cohort. The Suffolk County Department of Health will take full responsibility for the contact tracing. We're not involved with that, but we do have a critical piece of supporting the process by providing them with attendance information for the names and contact information for every child that was in the class, where another student was or a staff member was, that they have that information to reach out to those individuals and to make a decision about home quarantine. So again, if you've had exposure to someone who has a confirmed case and it's considered to be close exposure, the health department will in fact order you to quarantine at home for 14 days. That's the protocol. It's been in place now for a while. And we're hoping that we don't have that situation, but if we do, we'll be following that protocol by the letter. I can assure you of that. Next slide, please. In-person instruction. So we've gotten to the point in our presentation where we wanted to discuss returning students to the program. And I've listened to many phone calls from parents urging for the BOCES to open up its programs, expressing the needs of children. And I'm now to the point where I've recommended to the board that we do so with the governor's approval, which he announced. And I do so with great confidence and comfort that we've done everything possible and then to ensure the safety of our students, our staff, and will continue to do so into the future. The in-person instruction is it's a continuation of what your child was being taught in March prior to the closing of school, all aligned to the state standards. And I mentioned earlier that social distance protocols will be followed, which is 6 feet or greater. Staff and students, where it can be tolerated, will be wearing face masks, even with 6 feet of distances. So we maximize the mitigation of the spread of the virus. And to clarify once more that for students who require closer proximity due to safety issues or due to educational activities that are core activities, important activities to the educational program, staff are permitted to have closer contact than 6 feet and close proximate contact because in many situations that's required as part of the instructional program for children to keep them safe and also to provide the necessary educational services. In those situations, we have provided the necessary protection for staff to wear. And I went through it before, gloves, gowns, face masks, face shields, sanitizing agents. All these items will be available to staff to make sure that they have a comfort level also to work with children and to keep everyone protected, keep everyone healthy. Tim? So in addition to having your child return to school in person, we're going to offer our parents the option to continue with distance learning, remote learning. That's what your child has been exposed to over the past 3.5 months. Quite frankly, it was a huge challenge for our BOCES, and I think for virtually every district. Continues to be a challenge, but the more you do it, the better we've gotten at it. My preference would be to have your child return to school, but I'm not the parent, you are. And you're going to make that informed decision based upon information that you've read, based upon information that you learned through this informational setting, based upon information you're going to hear next week from program administrators. We want you to feel comfortable that your child will be safe in school. And that's why we're making that option available. We're doing it on a full-time basis. All of our programs will be open full-time, 5 day a week, a full day for our children that come to school full day, and half day for the several thousand students that attend our career and technical ed programs. You might ask, how is BOCES able to do this when virtually all the districts, particularly for secondary programs, are on some type of hybrid program? A hybrid meaning that students go to school possibly 2 days a week in person and then receive remote learning for the other 2 days, or it could be 2 and 3 days. And the simple explanation is that, as I mentioned before, that our classrooms have a much smaller enrollment population. We have classes of 6 students, 8 students, 9 students. In districts, they have classes of 20, 25 students, 28 students. And you just can't, with those numbers, provide the required social distancing. So that's how we're able to do it. We're going to continue to provide the supports for parents who opt for remote learning. It's electronic process we introduced towards the end of last year, and this summer, synchronous instruction, which is live instruction between the teacher and the students, and asynchronous instruction, where assignments are delivered remotely. We're going to continue with that process going forward. Anytime that we can approve it, we will. The BOCES hired extra staff with technology backgrounds to assist our teachers and families with implementing the technology into the home situation. And we will absolutely continue with that process. Tim? So just to capture the information, it's important information for parents. That's why I'm going through it and repeating it, so you're very clear in terms of understanding the options that are available for your child. So for our instructional programs, for those students who attend a full day special ed program, we're going to offer 2 options: attend the program full-time 5 days a week, or continue with the full-time 5 day a week remote instruction program. That will also apply. There's a limited number of students who attend career and technical ed on a full-time basis, and any student that attends a BOCES program full-time will be offered those 2 options, full-time in person or full-time remote instruction. When it comes to our career and technical ed students, we're providing a similar opportunity where parents can elect to send their child back to school. We're open 5 days a week. Students can receive their instruction 5 days a week. We'll also provide for students that do not want to attend in person, but rather receive their instructions remotely. That program will be provided. It's a continuation of what was provided last semester by the CTE teachers. And just a further explanation for our secondary students, because you're operating under many different, from district to district, there are variations on the hybrid programs. Some might do a Monday, Tuesday, take a break on Wednesday, do a Thursday, Friday, or some may do a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, alternating with Tuesday and Thursday for remote instruction. Because there are so many variations with those schedules, we're open 5 days a week, and we're working with your school districts. We will be completely flexible, whether you might be working, you might be attending in person, but your district only has in person 2 days a week. So, if you wish to attend 4 or 5 days a week, that's absolutely there. Again, we're open Monday to Friday. Same thing with students on remote instruction. I'm assuming some parents may opt not to have their child attend in person any days, but other parents may. Other parents may want to add to the classroom theory, the didactic instruction by having the clinical piece, the industry piece of instruction, and knowing that our students are having to follow multiple different schedules and districts. Just to be clear with our parents, that we will accommodate all those schedules. We want to make sure that whenever the student is available to attend the CTE program, 1 day a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, it'll be open every day. And we're going to work to ensure that your child has access to that programming. Next, Tim. We put into the presentation school schedules. This is, we're not changing any schedules, but we thought having the times there just to remind you would be helpful. We also anticipate there might be increased numbers of parents who want to drive their child to school and or pick up their child from school. And we're trying to make adjustments to accommodate that. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be conducting temperature checks in the school, and we don't want there to be long lines, so we're going to have students going through multiple entrances. So we have multiple areas of the school that are conducting those temperature checks. But again, we need to have the parents do that at home so that if your child has a fever, your child needs to stay home so they don't go into school, no one gets affected in school, and you're able to respond to your child's health needs as quickly as possible. Tim, next slide, please. Transportation. Most parents know this. BOCES doesn't provide the to and from school transportation. Your district does. But BOCES does provide transportation for midday shuttles. That's basically transporting students from one Wilson Tech campus to another, or transporting students from a special education high school to, we have 4 of them, to one of the 4 Wilson Tech campuses. And for buses that BOCES contracts for, we're going to ensure that all students will be wearing face masks unless there's an underlying medical condition or a disability that prevents them from doing so, that will be required. And we also are going to have our carriers wipe down the high-touch surfaces on bus between every route. So every cohort of students in between, we're going to have the buses wiped down, and the appropriate social distancing will be occurring on the buses. Next slide. Next is meals. With respect to meals, we're anticipating that our students will be eating in their classrooms at an alternate site. We don't want to commingle children unless absolutely necessary, and it's not necessary to do that in the cafeteria. We want to keep the cohort of students together throughout the school day. So we're going to have staff who will pick up the lunches. Staff will be wearing the proper protection equipment, gloves, so there's no, again, mitigating any kind of transmission of the virus. And the food be served in school classrooms. Students will be permitted to take off their mask, but they must maintain the 6 feet of social distancing to do so. Staff will be trained in food allergies. We have that information documented in all our schools for children with allergies, and we'll continue that, or any type of choking hazards. Again, that's a part of our normal protocol, whether a child is eating in the lunchroom or a classroom or anywhere. Those protocols go with the child wherever they are, wherever they're eating lunch. Tim? Communications, again, this is our second communication today with our parents about the reopening of school. The suggestions here, and we know that you read the plan because we've gotten many emails from parents. That's what helped inform the PowerPoint that we've presented to you tonight. There's a plethora of information on all different links to help inform the process of being familiar with COVID-19. One of the other issues, please keep your contact information updated with the school. So if we have to send you an email or reach you by a telephone, we have the latest information. And we also have made a decision to start an information newsletter for parents and to help inform our parents through this reopening process. We're going to provide updated information to parents so that if we get questions, concerns that are shared with us, usually if you get a question from a parent or 2 parents, 3 parents, that mostly all the parents or most of the parents have the same need for that clarification or information. So we're going to collect that information and then share that back out with our parents. We're going to continue the informational forums next week at the building level. You can follow us on Twitter. If you have questions, please just email them to Restart, please. Some of the questions that were put out there have to do that were somewhat incorporated into the presentation, but if they were important, we're again repeating them so everyone understands the answer. Will parents be able to choose whether their child attends a full day in-person program or a full day remote instruction? And the answer is yes, you will. We're going to shortly be sending you out a form. We're going to ask you to select which program on that form. We wanted to have this informational meeting with you beforehand share information with you, and have the parent select that information. It's critical we know that, and it's critical we know the information immediately, because we need to make a decision relative to our staff how they're going to be assigned. So if we have 90% of our students coming back to school and 10% being instructed remotely, we need to make a decision about which 90% of the teachers is going to be assigned to in-person schooling, and the other 10% that are going to be assigned to remote teaching. And as that percent can vary, and you can imagine that, our staff is interested, if not anxious, to know where their assignment's going to be, and are they going to be teaching remotely or teaching in person. So in order to have us provide the best programming for your child, we need to get that information back as quickly as possible following these information sessions. And we're going to ask you to provide that information for us to make that decision. We'll have the option to change your selection on a quarterly basis. So the end of the first quarter, it's typically around November 1st, but we're going to ask you 2 weeks prior to the end of the quarter to let us know if you want to change your child's option. And we need that time, because if parents are going to elect to have their children change from a remote to in-person, we need to respond to that. We might have to open up new classes, certainly reassign staff that were previously assigned to remote to in-person. Going to require a lot of flexibility on the part of staff. But in order for us to provide the program that you expect of us, we need the proper time to make those decisions relative to changes in the election of the instructional program. Will there be any orientations or open houses before school starts? The answer is no, there'll be no open schoolhouses, but the answer is yes. We're going to provide a virtual orientation for parents prior to the opening of school. That will be conducted by your child's principal. Next question, are the hand sanitizers being provided at school safe for children? The answer is yes. Every chemical, every cleaning agent that are used in school have to be approved. They're on an approved list at the state ed or up at a state office of management. They're on the EPA list. Schools are green sites, and we're heavily restricted in terms of what cleaning agents we can use, and the sanitizers and agents that we're using in our schools are safe and have been approved for use in a school situation. Next question, how often will bathrooms, classrooms, hallways be cleaned, disinfected? As I said earlier, with public shared spaces, hallways, doorknobs, doors, bathrooms, we're going to be cleaning them down during the day on a regular basis. And in the classroom, we're going to be doing the same thing. We're going to be throughout the entire day cleaning any type of surface or item that the child might touch before it's transferred to another student. So that's going to be an ongoing process. Again, every classroom has been provided, will be provided. We have the items with the necessary disinfectants, the antivirus, antibacterial wipes, so surfaces can be wiped down, the hand sanitizers, the antibacterial agents that we use on surfaces to kill any viruses or bacteria. All those items have been ordered, are in place, and all staff will have immediate access to those items. Tim? Next, are all Wilson Tech secondary programs being offered in 2020-21? The answer is yes. Every program that we normally would offer, in fact, we are offering for secondary students. Will face coverings and social distancing be required? Absolutely, face coverings are required. Every student is expected to wear a face covering unless there is an underlying medical condition or disability that prevents the student from wearing that face mask. Will there be social distancing? We'll have social distancing in, as I've said before, in all instructional areas. We always have 6 feet. However, when it comes to an issue of student safety, or when it comes to an issue of a core and important educational activity, the staff member is permitted to have closer proximate contact with the student. It could be right next to the student. It could be 3 feet from the student. What we're going to do is use judgment. And when it comes to health and safety, we're always going to ensure that the child is protected 100%. And that's going to happen in all of our programs. When it comes to a particular educational activity, if we're advising all of our staff, everything that can be done at 6 feet, do it at 6 feet. And if something is really critical that it can't be demonstrated, if you're doing a tune-up on a car and you want to show students about how to gap a spark plug, maybe you want to bring them in 5 feet instead of 6 feet because people can't see the gap that you're gapping, that you're using the gauging tool to space the distance in a fire plug, or not a fire plug. It's, what is it? Spark plug. Thank you, Tim. In a spark plug. But the answer is, unless it's necessary to a core activity or it's a health and safety issue, it's 6 feet in all situations. And again, in a similar way to where special ed classes are smaller, our CTE classes, they're very large areas, as you can imagine, because you have to have an area for the theory, and then you have to have an area for the practical exposure to the industry requirements, the lab, the hands-on work. So there's sufficient space in all of our CTE programs to ensure the 6 feet of social distancing. Next question, how will transportation be handled to Wilson Tech if my home district is opening with a hybrid model? And as I said earlier, there, as many districts as there are, and we have, I think 39, 40 districts that, not just the Western Suffolk BOCES, districts that send children to our programs. So there are, as you can imagine, many different versions of hybrid schedules, particularly for secondary students. And what we're doing is we're open 5 days a week in our CTE programs, and we will be completely flexible to work with our districts to ensure that when students need to attend, and even if it includes students on the remote learning, there may be a desire for to have those students attend maybe 1 day a week, so they get the hands-on practical experience. We are working with our school districts to be as flexible as we can be. We're here to educate children, and we want to make sure that we don't deny that access to children by this pandemic, and we'll continue to work with districts in that regard. Next question, will paraprofessionals be provided at home for students attending remotely? There is no provision for this. We actually were discussing different types of support that we can provide to families last spring. But having paraprofessionals work at home is something that we not only won't do, we just don't think it would be an appropriate support service to provide, and that's not the working arrangements that those individuals were hired under. So the answer to that question is no. Next slide, Tim. Who should I ask? So if you have questions related to transportation, I'm sure you're familiar with this. You want to contact your home district. If you have questions related to health, call your family doctor. These are doctor knows you, knows your children, and they're going to work hard to help inform you and give you information to help you make the right decision for your children. We urge you to do that. Reopening of school questions, send them to Restart at Western Suffolk BOCES. We read all of them. We use those questions to inform this informational session. That's how we came up with the topic. So please continue to do that. We want to thank you for taking the time. We've been online for almost an hour and a half. I'm going to end the conversation the way we started it. I have 3 children myself. I completely respect, appreciate, and understand decisions that parents have to make relative returning to your child to an in-person program or to a remote. So we're giving you that option. If you don't feel it's safe, we're giving that option. I will tell you, as the person who runs the agency, we've done everything we're required to do and then some. We will continue to make the building as safe as possible and clean down every surface. Again, I'm aware of particularly some of our children with disabilities who have underlying medical conditions, how important it is that we do this with the utmost diligence, and we will. And if I didn't believe the schools were safe, I wouldn't be having this conversation with you. So I thank you for joining us tonight. I hope we've made that decision easier for you, whichever way you turn. And I urge you to, if you haven't, to go to our reopening plan, inform yourself. If there are questions that have come up as a result of the conversation that we're having tonight, please send them to the Restart email address, and we'll make sure that we address those questions when we schedule our next informational meetings for next week. So thank you again for joining us. We're actually excited about seeing the students back in the program. I know in speaking to so many parents, how the students are looking forward to coming back to school, and we look forward to welcoming them back. We're working very proactively to develop strategic plans to ensure that they have a smooth transition back into the program. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good evening.